What's going on, college basketball fans, and welcome into the Sports Hub STL Selection Sunday conversation, as we're going to bring a lot of college basketball talk your way over the coming hour or so, with many local teams and angles to discuss. The Missouri Tigers, we now know their draw. We know the draw for Illinois, kind of, because they will be playing the winner of a first four matchup in Dayton. And we know SIUE doesn't have to play in Dayton. They will be playing Houston for the first game. Excited to get going here, as we will welcome in a number of guests along the way. Guests like Mike Claiborne, guests like Kareem Rush. We've got a lot of people here at the same time, so it's going to be a little bit interesting. But, gentlemen, I want to start with you guys asking about your thoughts on this Mizzou draw, because when I saw Drake pop up on the screen, I thought, hey, Mizzou, a 6 seed, that's a pretty favorable draw. But the 11 in Drake playing the 364th ranked tempo in college basketball, that's going to be a really interesting adjustment for Missouri. Kareem, your thoughts initially on the matchup when you saw it pop up there on the show?
Yeah, I quickly went to Google and looked at, Drake's stats and saw what you just said, that they were, definitely a slow tempo team. So it's definitely going to be a clash of styles, with us, like to play up tempo. But they're a great defensive team. They got a great point guard. So I'm interested to kind of see, how we play. But going into what, how we played towards the tail end of the year, definitely a favorable matchup for us. We got to play our game. I'm going to do some more research into Drake, watch a couple of their games, kind of seeing, how Ant may match up with their point, which I know is their top player. But again, with 6 seed, very favorable, draw for us. So I'm looking forward to kind of seeing how it plays out.
The 30-3 Drake Bulldogs, winner of the Missouri Valley Conference, so familiar with them in the area, and going out to Wichita should be interesting as well to see the Mizzou contingent of fans that travel a little bit west. Claibs, what do you think about Drake? This is an interesting one, a team that's only lost 3 games all year, a little bit daunting potentially for the Tigers.
No, it really is for a lot of different reasons. Missouri Valley has always been a competitive conference, and I know everybody will talk about how Drake can slow it down. There was a time, and Kareem, you remember when you played and you would play teams that would slow things down, and everybody would try and be patient. I think because of the athleticism of what Missouri may have, and as many guys as Dennis Gates rolls into a game, they can play Drake's game if they need to. And then they'll have Drake impatient, and they may be outsized and they may be outgunned. And once that starts to take place, they'll take some bad fouls, and all of a sudden Missouri will start to have the advantage. It's going to be a tall order for Drake, but I think because of their coaching and how they prepare and how they've dealt with things during the course of the year, it'll be an interesting game for at least a half and plus.
Okay, and right now I already pulled it up on DraftKings. -5.5 is the initial spread. Missouri is favored in this game as the higher seed. Be interested to see how that plays out. Well, welcome in Earl Austin Jr. as well. Curious, Earl, as you look at the bracket and the way things have broken down now for some of these local teams, what stands out to you about what we saw and the big reveal of the bracket?
Well, you guys, as I was coming in, you guys were talking about the Missouri Drake matchup, and every year the Missouri the committee they say they don't do it, but they put together matchups that for interest that it kind of shows a little sense of humor. And I think this was the one this time, since obviously Missouri's a good team. Drake, obviously a great team out the valley, but Drake's full of kids from the state of Missouri who were kind of under recruited and went to Division II. Good players like obviously Bennett Sturch from Liberty, Abreu from Willard, Cameron Manuel from Staley, a young man Isaiah Howard from Class 2A Plattsburgh, Cale Combs from Nixa. So they're just full of all these kids. They got another kid from Staley. So I think that's what adds to the intrigue of this particular game. It should be fun. Obviously, if you're Missouri, you got to disrupt. It all begins with Sturts. I mean, he's become one of the best point guards in the country, and he kind of stirs the drink. So you have to disrupt him and his flow, and if you're going to disrupt Drake, because they're so precision in what they do offensively and then with their pace. But like Mike said, Mizzou's got so many athletes, and I think the return of Caleb Grill's 3-point jump shot needs to, if Missouri's going nothing to get by but make a run, that has to happen too. He's struggling a little bit from 3-point range. I think that's going to be a big key for Missouri to move on. And obviously getting Mitchell back, if he's 100% ready to go, he obviously poses a big problem with his way he can score inside.
And the one aspect of that, Drake, maybe a team with not a ton of size, and so getting a healthy Mark Mitchell back could help Missouri. And we know Dennis Gates said all season long, Caleb Grill, you got the green light. So even though he maybe has had a little bit of a lull in his shooting, I expect that Caleb Grill will be firing away from deep. We'll bring in right now Bob Ramsey as well to have a quick conversation. And coming up shortly, we will be talking with the coach of SIUE, Brian Baroni. Excited to have him on. But real quickly, before we get to the coach, Rammer, your thoughts about Mizzou's draw as well as what potentially SIUE is going to be seeing.
Yeah, Brenden. Hey, Earl, Kareem and Claibs. But, yeah, I got to see Drake in the Missouri Valley Conference tournament, and they're fun to watch. They don't, it's not high tempo, which we typically think of as the fun watch. I think the matchup, though, look at, Mizzou lost 4 of 5, but look in their losses. They scored 81, 83, 84, and 93. So even in losing, they score a lot. And I don't know that I think Drake could play great defense and still not be able to keep up. So will Mizzou score 85 against Drake? I think that's a stretch. But could Drake hold them to 75? Can Drake score 75 against Mizzou? So I think those two styles, I think Mizzou will be better at their style than Drake will be at theirs. But that contrast will make for an interesting matchup.
And fascinating too, Rammer, as you talk there, I just took a look at it. 132.5 is the total on this game. So expected that maybe Drake is going to be able to impose its tempo to a degree, but it's interesting that, again, Missouri, a 5.5-point favorite. So we will come back to Earl in just a moment, but I'm going to keep Bob Ramsey with me right now to bring in the coach of SIUE, which will be taking on Houston in the Midwest region, Coach Brian Baroni. Coach, how are you, and how exciting has this day been with learning your draw and where your team will be heading next?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me, and it's been very exciting. Not going to lie, the energy in our arena right now was I was trying to go play a game. I was like, come on right now. Let's go hoop. It was awesome.
That's fantastic. And the trophy right there for the OVC conference tournament prominently displayed. I think that's the way to do it.
I actually didn't even do that on purpose on this one. Someone just said, like, not that I'm not smart enough to do that, but that was a well played. I like it.
It is well played, as was everything for your team. Talk about, too, in that conference tournament, you guys had in your first game a 2-point win where it's really close, and then kind of able to get that one over. And once you're through that one, it seemed like in the finale against SEMO, you guys were really able to open things up and kind of get back at a team that you had faced earlier in the season.
Yeah, I think like when the double bye is what you want, but you are playing a team that just won, and you're playing a team that just played in that arena. Like in the OVC, you only get 20 minutes in the arena the day of the game, the way the tournament's laid out. And then Tennessee State's really good, in my opinion. Penny does a great job. And then we kind of settled in. We got down to a bad start. They were scoring pretty good well early, and we just settled in. And it wasn't an easy game to coach, but it was a calming game to coach. The guys really took over and just kind of allowed me to sit back, make some adjustments, do some things that made me feel good about myself. But at the end of the day, they were the guys that went out there and got it done.
Hey, Coach, I got to see you play in person a couple of times this year, and I want to echo what Brenden said. Congratulations. Just I can't think of anybody that's just not rooting for SIUE and the way you guys went about your business and having such a successful year. As things started to come together late for you, did you start locking it down a little more defensively, and were you more consistent on that end of the court?
Yeah, I think, over time your defense gets better or worse. All right. I know it sounds good, but you don't really ever stay the same. And our guys really started understanding, the other guy, what he was able to do. If I'm next to him, I can help a little bit more. If not, I don't need to help as much. Really started kind of becoming one. And then there were times where, we just over schemed and at times a little bit down the stretch, and the guys really, hey, let's just go out there and attack. Let's play hard. Let's pressure, and let's do what we do well and make the adjustments after that if we need to. And I thought that's one of the things, even as a coach, you learn about your team, and you have to be willing to kind of make that adjustment and kind of be wrong sometimes.
Coach, you'll be facing Coach, I'm curious for your thoughts on this matchup against the Houston team, obviously earning a top seed in the region, so you know they've got a lot of skill and talent with the way that they play. But interesting stylistically, they like to slow things down a little bit. You guys don't necessarily mind playing things in the half court. How do you kind of view this matchup once you saw, hey, this is who we're going to be facing in our next game?
Yeah, we've had, you kind of anticipated throughout the week. We watched quite a bit of film already on them. Actually put some stuff. It was hard to like totally say this is who we're playing to the team, but we snuck some sets in that they ran. I mean, they're good. They're so well coached. They're tough as nails. They crash the offense. What they do really well is the stuff that you can't really scheme for. It's like, hey, you got to box out. And if you do, you do. If you don't, you don't. You got to make sure that you get through these screens. If you do, you do. You don't, you don't. And coach does a great job in terms of culture and obviously playing to their guys' strengths. But that being said, if we can, get the ball moving a little bit, not play, be physical, but not get caught up in traps and such, and get the ball to the other side, you have a chance. Because I think we have some pretty good players, and we have guys that believe they can win every time we go out there.
Yeah, and talk a little bit about Rayshawn. And I know you're not a one-man team, but he's so fun to watch, and things really start to click when he can get it going. So obviously he's number one, and he has been all year on everybody's scouting report. How does he overcome that? He's just such a remarkable kid and a hometown kid. He's fun to root for.
Well, I think a lot of the things that he does well is he's willing to kind of defer at times, and not necessarily what he does, but we've moved him around the court quite a bit. Brian Taylor has been phenomenal for us. Brian Taylor has, been the primary guard at times quite a bit. That allows teams not to just totally set, you have to guard Ray right away. And then once he gets off the ball and then you deny him, well, that's hard to get the ball back. So being able to defer has really opened up his game. His other guys have really done a good job of, doing what they're well. I mean, Brian Taylor shot 47% from three. Ring Malith has been really good in his, kind of the versatility and inside out game. And that you have a lot of guys I can go through. Des Polk is such an anchor for our program that level of trust has allowed Ray to not be not necessarily a one-man show, like you said. I agree with you, but one-dimensional. And he's really opened up his game because of his trust.
Hey, Coach, first of all, congratulations on getting in the tournament. That's a really cool thing, and I don't care what level it is at any time in your life. But for you having a team that, you put together, these aren't kids. These aren't 17 and 18-year-old kids. They're much more mature. How do you still find a way to make sure that they understand that the skill set along with fundamentals is the same as it's going to be whether they're playing Houston or the Houston Rockets? That's the first question. And the second question is, how are you going to be able to temper Joe Pott, your voice of your broadcast? How are you going to be able to temper his emotions? Because, I'm a little concerned about his health, because him going to the tournament for the first time is something that is it's epic. And knowing how he speaks for so many other people who followed your program before now, how do you make sure you keep him seatbelted up at the broadcast table?
Well, I'll answer the second first. I had to go apologize to my wife because me and Joe had we were hugging afterwards, telling each other we love each other. And the seatbelt, it's not a bad idea. One of my old coaches, Mike Dean, look it up.
Mike Dean.
Wagner.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because he was at Marquette with me.
Yes.
Then he went to Lamar, then he went to Wagner. Yeah. He actually put a seatbelt on his bench, on his seat. So that's not a bad idea. I'll do that for sure. The other thing, like you said, I really like that other question. Guys are a little bit older. The guys that don't understand how good the NBA is in terms of their development. I mean, the greatest player of all time, Michael Jordan. I'm not getting into debate. If we're debating, you guys are all wrong. But the
Michael Jordan, you just be tied for first. You be tied for first.
But even him by the towards the end of his career, he evolved into getting better in different areas. So if he's willing and able to do it, we all, no matter what age you are, but also you are dealing with guys that might have not figured it out yet or still rely on what they do best. And we all want to do what we do best, right? Because it's hard to work on what you don't do as well. So you build it into the practice plan, in my opinion. You do a lot of skill. We do from 8 to 16 minutes a day to start a practice of individual kind of development. Sometimes it's something as simple as playing off 2 feet and shooting layups for 6 minutes. Sometimes it's, pivoting and spacing. So I think there's a balance. You talk to them about development, and then you just you do it every single day in practice. Our first 20 minutes of practice is very similar every day, and it's really just skill development.
Coach, you've talked a lot about the players and the guys for this year's team, but what has this journey been like for you, kind of grinding through the number of years of your tenure there at SIUE to now kind of reach what is right now the pinnacle of what this program has accomplished at the Division I level?
Yeah, it means a lot, because what it's shown me is that I'm not very smart sometimes, but I'm smart enough to put myself in a position with really good people around me. And I like being right about that. Like not being arrogant, but like I'm right that I have really good staff around me. Like that helps. I have good players. I obviously, have made mistakes, and then you evolve from those mistakes, like on a day-to-day type of deal. So, that's very, very important that we were on the right path and we never stopped. You don't get a lot of time sometimes in this profession. You really don't. And I remember when I got the job, I was an interim. You have a year or two, you have 2 years on your contract at most. And, everyone's telling me, go get a couple of junior college guys, because the rules weren't, you couldn't play transfers right away, and just go do it. Doesn't matter. Just go win some games and figure it out. I'm like, it's just not going to be how I do it with that guy. Like, people can do it. And not even like I recruit junior college guys, but like not just best talent. I just felt that we had to put a team together. And fortunately we changed the culture enough, I thought, early, for people to value that. And then we won enough. And I'm sure there were times where there were some meetings behind the scenes, but whatever, like, right. Let's just keep doing what you think is right. And then obviously it's paid off, and hopefully we can continue to get this thing going for years to come.
Paid off in a major way. SIUE will take on Houston in the 116 matchup in the Midwest region, taking their shot. Thank you so much, Coach Baroni.
Thanks,
we really appreciate your time. Congratulations once again on this tremendous accomplishment, and good luck on Thursday. We will all be watching and rooting from wherever we may be.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. And so that has been Coach Brian Baroni. We really appreciate his time, head coach for SIUE. Jumping on with me now, Chris Pelikan. We've got Kareem Rush back. Let's dive into a little bit more Mizzou conversation. Chris, we haven't had a chance to get your thoughts on the draw in particular. You've got the Mizzou flag behind you, so I know you know exactly what's going on with this one. Let's get some quick thoughts from you, Chris, on what the Tigers are going to see with Drake, because I tell you, I saw that, in the pace just keeps jumping out in my mind. 364th. I think that's the number of teams that are in D1. So yeah, this is very much a stylistic difference from what Mizzou likes to employ.
There's no doubt about that, Brenden. But I will say that my 2 cents is that what we've seen with Mizzou all season long is they have helped. They've dictated the pace more than anyone. Teams have tried to slow it down against them. Mississippi State jumps out earlier in the year in Starkville, and it didn't work real well. And a lot of that comes down to what Kareem and I talk about all the time, Anthony Robinson's defense and his ability to get his hands in passing lanes and bother the distributor for the other team. He's so good at that. And I think I'll be honest, if you're looking at a 6-11 matchup, I would much rather have this matchup than one of the 2 play-in games, that sort of thing. And so I really do think that the draw is fantastic for them right now. Now we talk about, you play one game at a time for sure, but that possible looming 3 seed matchup against Texas Tech is a scary one. They're the best in my mind of the 3 seeds sitting there, but I know that they've got a lot to get through in Drake. But I do think that, I think Claib said it earlier, Mizzou's got the guys to do this. And Kareem and I talk about all the time about Mizzou and their switching defense, and how when you play certain teams with certain athleticism and certain size issues, the switching becomes a problem. And I don't know that we're going to see those kinds of problems out of a Drake team, who obviously is very, very solid fundamentally. But let's be real. They're 30-3 this year. They haven't played a team anywhere near the caliber of Missouri this year. They had nice wins against Miami and K-State, and they did beat Vanderbilt earlier in the year when Vandy was still finding themselves. But end of the day, I do think this might be a bit of culture shock, might be the best way to put it for Drake. And I do think that Mizzou gets this one. And I'll be honest, I think they get it kind of easily.
Oh, I like that. And 5.5-point favorite according to DraftKings. Kareem, another thing I noticed about Drake, I don't think they've got a player taller than 6'8". Mark Mitchell is dealing with the knee injury, but boy, could he be a real contributor if he gets back fully healthy. I think they probably were being a little just cautious with his health. That's a guy that maybe could have a big game in this matchup, just given the size advantage Mizzou could look to deploy against Drake.
I mean, all matchups aside, this is the tournament, so you're going to have a great game regardless of who you're playing, so styles sometimes clash, but, I anticipate this kind of a highly competitive game. Hopefully, our styles, prevail. But as a player, going to the tournament, you get brand new life. We didn't finish as well as we wanted to finish, but now we're 0-0. It's win or go home. So I'm excited to kind of see how the guys come out and show up against a 30-3 team. It's going to be a challenging matchup. But again, I think all in all, if we play our game, we got a good chance to win.
Hey, Brenden, the one thing I think is really, really important, if Dennis Gates is talking to his team about anything right now, it is avoiding the letdowns defensively that's plagued this team over its last, 4 out of 5 losses. They'd have these great stretches, and then all of a sudden they'd go to sleep for 2 or 3 minutes at a time. That's not going to fly in a game where obviously possessions might be at a bit more of a premium. So if this team can play as well as they have at different times throughout the season defensively, I think it's going to be tough for Drake to score the ball. And I do think that Missouri can change the tempo a little bit. Like I said, I like this as well as any matchup they could have gotten in the first round, to be real honest with you.
Yeah, we just got to lock in. I mean, because we're going to score regardless. And again, I'm hoping that we can find Caleb, and we all know, when he's hitting, it kind of opens up our offense and gives us a different type of energy. So, I'm hoping Dennis kind of finds some different, actions for him, to, kind of free him up, because, team is focused on him the last 4 or 5 games, and we see, how that kind of impacts us on the offensive end. So, hopefully, Mark's coming back healthy. Tamar had a great finish to the last 2 games. So keeping him active, keeping him aggressive, and, having people, create shots for Caleb, kind of fuels us. So, I'm looking forward to kind of Dennis making a few different, corrections and having a good game plan for Drake.
And Kareem, you kind of mentioned it. It's the tournament now. So whatever the end of the season may have been, you turn the page and it's a completely different story. Talk about that from a player's perspective. You're obviously on a Missouri team that maybe didn't get as high of a seed as you might have wanted in your March Madness, but you're able to go on a run nevertheless because you just turn that page and say, it's tournament time. We've got to play our best. Yeah.
Once you're in, now you're thinking of the Cinderella story. You want to make that magical run. You want to make the final highlights of the Luther Vandross March Madness turn into one shining moment. So you get all these different things that go into your mind. You're in a tournament. You envision winning a national championship. So again, those 4 or 5 losses that we had towards the end of the season, those don't even count. Now we're 6 seed. We had a great, draw. Obviously, Drake gonna be a great team. They're gonna do a lot of film, coverage on them in the next couple of days. But again, Dennis gonna have those guys ready. Players are ready, seniors are ready. That leadership within the locker room, get these guys prepared. It's a big stage. Guys gonna have fun. It's one of those things you're gonna look back when you're done playing and remember, kind of where you were as far as March Madness and what these tournament games mean to you, in regard to your career.
And just one more thought before we bring in, we're going to kind of shift around after some Mizzou talk a little Illinois, and just take a larger look at the bracket. But I can't help but think, when you look at that 6-11, all right, if Mizzou advances, this game's being played in Wichita. I think there's a pretty good chance that we're going to see the Missouri Tigers in that round of 32 laying the hurt on Patrick Mahomes. He's going to probably be at that game, and he's not going to be a happy camper if he has to face the Tigers. I can't help but think of some of the narrative aspects when we see the bracket come out. Boys, that's one that I looked at and said, that's pretty spicy if we get that chance.
That will be good. Pat would definitely be there. I think he would definitely come. So that'd be a good little thing for Wichita.
It'd be a really, really tough game. But again, I mean, there's a lot that could favor Mizzou in that game without any question. I mean, obviously it would be closer to a home court advantage in Wichita, Mahomes aside, but Texas Tech is a tough team.
Yeah.
And JT Toppin's the kind of guy who, I look at him and I've seen him play a handful of times this year. His game reminds me a little bit more. He's got Mark Mitchell athleticism at 6'9", but boy, he is a warrior rebounding wise. He's the kind of guy you'd have to build a game plan around. And I think that could be a heck of a fun game if it happens. But, again, we just had Coach Baroni on. I think if he heard us talking about the game after the game you're supposed to win, there'd be problems. So
yeah. First things first.
Yes, first things first. I just saw that Mahomes, because you see it across the bracket too. I believe there could be a matchup with Coach Cal and Patino in the second round. They do these little things that you kind of wonder about and make you think. But in the case of Illinois, let's bring in some more of our panelists here, because we don't even know yet, Claibs. Oh, I'm sorry, Claibs, did you have a Mizzou thought to get
I had
to?
a Mizzou question.
Yeah, go ahead.
For Kareem, you've been in this situation before.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether you know the people you talking to, they haven't. We didn't have that skill set. So what's it like for you when you see a team on the board that you don't really know a lot about, and you get on the floor and you want to be patient because, you get those first 2 fouls and all of a sudden the game changes. But you also want to stay aggressive and do all the things that you've been able to do leading up through the season. So what's your mindset like that, especially when you're walking in that uncharted territory?
Yeah, I mean, that's on the coach's job as far as our prep is concerned. So before you step on the court, you know exactly who you're going to play against, even though you may be a different conference and a different team you haven't saw that year. But we have our game plan in mind, and we want to stick to that and execute what we're out there to do. As a player, that was the focus. I want to go out there and make an impact and lead to victory, especially in the tournament. That's where legends are made. It's where you kind of make your name and push your team forward. So as a player, you're just excited about the opportunity to be one of the 68 now, to compete for a national championship. All the season, the regular season doesn't matter now. Now it's win or go home. You're just excited for the opportunity. Everybody, the fans, school, are all excited. It's a different type of energy around tournament time. So it's an honor to be able to get a chance to play in it. And I got 3 years, so it's definitely an honor thing I look back on. It's like, yeah, that was a hell of a time.
All right, let's go ahead and shift gears here, gentlemen. We'll talk a little bit about Illinois, who doesn't yet know their opponent. They're going to play the winner of the first four matchup between Texas and Xavier. It's always interesting with the first four in Dayton because those are some of the teams that were the very last teams to make it in, but oftentimes they're dangerous because they get their first game under them and are able to go on a little bit of a run. What do we think about the way things are sitting right now for Illinois, who obviously Mizzou saw them in St. Louis earlier in the season, but now it's on to a matchup that is yet unknown for the Illini. Rammer, do you have a thought on that?
I got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I would ask all you guys this. When I look at Illinois, who really struggled with illness and injury, and I don't know how much that was a factor on some of their shooting statistics, in and out of games and trying to be consistent and cohesive and connected offensively, because they don't shoot for a high volume of threes and they don't shoot for a high percentage. At some point, do we expect that to be a factor that could bite the Illini moving forward?
I think that, there was a time when you lived by the three and you died by the three. Now I think everybody accepts it as part of his offense. But I think when you get in a tournament like this, especially against an opponent you haven't seen a lot, you get back to the basics and figure out how you can shorten the game, run your offense, set screens, draw some fouls, put some people at the free throw line. Because I think if you try and get it out of your personality of who you are, that's when you go home early. You start playing against them instead of them playing against you. So I'm of the belief that if Illinois stays with their basics, and if they get the three, you got to take it. But they've been used to winning games without the three as much as some other teams, and they've also found themselves. Weren't they tops in scoring in the Big Ten?
They can really score.
Yeah. So they found other ways to score.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Rammer, I would, to answer your question, I would say, that's been Illinois the entire season, right? It's just the Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah.
And you guys know this well enough. You've seen tens of thousands of college basketball games. If Underwood can get that team to do what they did when they were pretty much a consensus top 10. I think most people, if you go back to November, thought Illinois had as good of a shot of winning the Big Ten as anyone. And then it just became inconsistency. But they have talent coming out of, every area. It's there for them, And again, Kareem played on a team that was an 11 seed at one point in time and was one, Aaron McGee big game away from the Final Four.
I'm not
and
there.
And that team.
Don't tell me. Don't say it. I hate it. I was 0-6 against Oklahoma, so there.
I had to remind you of that one. But
I know.
The truth is that those Mizzou teams that Kareem were on were full of talent. It was just sometimes a matter of consistency in a tough Big 12 at the time. So, it's there for Illinois. There's no doubt about it in my mind. It just comes down to which Illinois is going to show up.
Brenden, some of the most dangerous teams in the NCAA tournament are those 11 seed teams that have to play in Dayton.
Yeah.
And then if they win their way, I look at UCLA. Corona went to the Final Four. John Giannini took an 11 seed LaSalle team to the Sweet 16, because all of those teams are like the last to get in, but they're talented teams, and then they're in. So all the pressure, all the burden is off, and now you're going out and play. And like you say, and Texas and Xavier are pretty good teams. I guess Trey Johnson's one of the best freshmen in the country for Texas. I mean, he was a bucket.
He's good.
He's
Earl,
and
I mean, that was us my junior year. I think we were 12
right.
seed. We were 12 seed. So we won those first two, and then you're like, whatever, let's go. Final Four.
Xavier and Conwell, who played for Josh Schertz and Indiana State. He was one of their best players on that NLT. He had 38 in the Big East tournament game. So, ironically, he's playing against his other two Indiana State teammates, Larry and Kent, who played for Texas. But so those are dangerous teams coming out of that 11 seed bracket, especially if they get that first win. St. Bonaventure is another one who did that with Courtney Stockard, beat UCLA and came and win another game in the tournament. So that's probably what Illinois has to deal with as well.
Well, that's the beauty. That's the beauty of the tournament. You get the momentum going, and then it just kind of snowballs. So that's, like I said, the season doesn't even matter. Now you want to be playing. Obviously, you want to be playing your best ball going to tournament time. But getting those first, couple wins can kind of, start that ball rolling, start that steamrolling process happening. So, like I said, the tournament time is always exciting. So I'm excited to kind of see what happens. There's always going to be some upset somewhere. I'm just hoping it's not our boys, but we'll see what happens.
I was going to say, look at Texas too, right? Who very well could be the second round opponent. I think that's the second round. But you've got Rodney Terry there, who is a guy who most people thought was going to get fired if this team doesn't make. Think about how Rodney Terry coaches in adversity. When Chris Beard gets fired, I mean, most people thought that team was falling apart in Texas, and all of a sudden Rodney Terry takes them deep into the NCAA tournament. I mean, this is a guy, he's a wartime coach, and I mean, this team, I think a lot of guys thought they were going to say goodbye to this guy, and now they've got new life. I mean, they could be as tough as anybody to get out, because as Earl pointed out, I mean, the talent is obviously there, and Rodney Terry's got great pedigree despite being a coach for just 2 years there. In terms of the way he coaches in March. So when I'm talking back about Drake and Missouri, I'm really excited that Missouri's draw is Drake, because you want to run into a wounded animal like Texas. I mean, I think it's a scary thought for a lot of teams. It could be a fun second round game if it is Texas and Illinois.
And what's funny about that is a lot of times those teams that make the first four in Dayton, there are opinions from the outside about whether you should have been in, shouldn't have been in. At this point, it really doesn't make any difference anymore. We know there's a lot of talent on these teams. Claibs, I'm kind of curious for your thoughts on that with teams like Texas and Xavier, who there are going to be some people who say, they shouldn't have even been in the field. When they take the floor on Tuesday or Wednesday, whenever those games are happening, that doesn't matter anymore. And those teams are more than capable of going on a run.
You get a second chance. And let's take this into account. A lot of these teams that are in the tournament have a lot of new players and a lot of new faces thanks to the portal. And it takes a little longer for some teams to mesh and come together. But the common denominator is they're good players. Now, they may change schools for whatever reason, but they're good players. And if they start to come together at the right time, who knows? And because of this modern era of the portal, you can't take anybody for granted, because good teams and good programs like a Texas, teams that have had success, you have to remember this is the one time where the name on the jersey is the reason why they had good players with the names on their back, because of the institution. And Texas is not going to spend money and recruit and get people out of the portal who they don't think can play. So maybe they're peaking at the right time. I think, there used to be a time where the winner of that play-in, you say, okay. But somebody mentioned earlier, they've already got into a winning mode, and they've been in playoff contention well before the tournament started. Their mindset has been. So now when you get a couple of other good players, coaches figure out what they can do, what they can't do. He shortens the bench maybe, or he finds a way to get certain guys in games. Man, they could be a handful. I wouldn't want to play them.
What's your take on that, Kareem? A team that kind of felt like it was playing postseason basketball even before the postseason actually began. What kind of dangerous element can that add to a scenario like this one?
Yeah, I mean, that's all about momentum. You're already playing those high-stake games. So when it's tournament time, this is nothing new to you. Like you said, if you playing and you're winning those games, and now when tournament starts, these high pressure situations, nothing new to you. You're ready to step in and capitalize on it. So again, those playing games are always fun and always a tough game. So, but again, I don't want to see Texas. That freshman is a tough guy to handle, and they're playing well toward the end. So we see how that kind of plays out.
In the other first 4 game on the other side of the bracket, San Diego State, and they kind of took the drama out of it with the first region revealed showing North Carolina making the field despite a 1-12 record with quad 1 games. Rammer, with your familiarity with the A10 and seeing a lot of games at that level and teams that I think when you talk about mid-majors are probably underrated relative to how many get in year over year. What's your thought on the message maybe that it sends with a UNC team? Sure, they played a lot of tough games, had opportunities, but with only a 1-12 record against the quad 1, I was curious for your thoughts on seeing them pop up as a team that made the field today.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed. I might have shuffled a couple of other teams in and a couple out, but I think you guys already touched on it. Yeah, a couple of teams will be butthurt a little bit that they're out. But in the end, it depends on what the evaluators evaluate. And I'm even talking about the supposedly objective metrics. Well, somebody's got to decide what metrics are in the metrics and what they value and how they weight those values. So there's subjectivity to all of it. And full disclosure, I'm a mid-major honk.
Yeah.
And so it disappoints me when we go 12, 13 deep. But let me say this, that 12th team in the SEC and the 13th, they're really good and probably better than a lot of the mid-major teams that I would like to see in. So I get that. And then for me, with the tinfoil hat on as well, I would say that I'm really concerned that sooner than later, the SEC, Big 10, Big 12, and ACC are just going to have their own event, and the rest of us will have to go somewhere else. And that's really, I think we're getting closer and closer to that every year. Now, no offense to Kareem, the elitists out there probably don't care. Put the best teams in and let them play. I get that.
We like I like Cinderella runs. I like to see them.
Okay, good.
And they got Hoopers there. They got Hoopers down there.
That's right. So Kareem, what you're saying is Vanderbilt will be the new Cinderella as far as teams that get in and nobody else. Right. You know what, though? I'm going to tell you something. Bob, you hit the nail on the head. I think this thing of separation is closer than anyone thinks. I would not be surprised if we hear something after this tournament about what's next, because they're already having conversations. And when it comes down to them coming up with their own system, how they do the TV money, how they come up with their own rules to address the portal and the NIL. And once they get that established and understand that the next thing they have to counter is the governmental interruptions, because the government's going to get involved in this at some point, because you have too many contracts for this NIL that come from different states, come from different universities, and there's no boilerplate. And at some point, somebody's going to sue somebody with regard to how the money was supposed to be paid. So with the head of the NCAA being a former politician, don't think that these guys haven't already thought about how we might want to march just to Capitol Hill so we'll have more uniformity and we can control it better.
And even on a lesser level, it seems as though tournament expansion and that being a topic of conversation has been pretty active recently. But Earl, I want to get your thoughts on that, because and I know that Rammer would feel the same way. It's my concern with expansion would sort of be, well, is it just letting more of the teams that are more of those money schools in and the mid-majors kind of still get left to the side? I don't know if that's a great solution either, but obviously you're going to end up following the money at the end of the day, as Claibs was basically saying.
There's no need to expand. You're going to let this North Carolina team expand. You can't give people credit for losing. That's what they did. You can't reward losing. Yeah, you could schedule tough, play tough, but they lost every game. Every game. Yes, so you can't just give people credit. West Virginia is obviously not a bit major, but they didn't even show up on the last 4 in, this 4 out, on the outside. I'm sure they were sitting there thinking they're safe, and all of a sudden they're on the outside. We were like, what happened to West Virginia? And that's not even a mid-major program. But yeah, I
So Earl, what you saying is they didn't make plane reservations. They had guys who were ready to go their own separate direction because they knew they weren't getting in.
No, it didn't even occur to anybody that West Virginia was even on the bubble.
I didn't think they were.
They were never in Lenardi or
no. That's right.
Virginia's name on the, or maybe if I'm not mistaken, you didn't see their name on any of those bubble projections. It was up Boise and North Carolina, Texas, whatever. So we all assumed West Virginia, and then they're probably saying like, oh my God, they didn't call our name, In North Carolina, like you said, they just let you know right away. Boom, North Carolina, right away. They let you know what this is all about. Yeah, that was.
And if you guys, if any of you guys have a mid-major crying towel, I'll put it right here on my shoulder. I admit it up front. But here's the other thing that goes into that. Well, pick any mid-major team. Well, they didn't have any quad ones, or they only played a couple of quad one games, blah, blah, blah. Well, you think you can't schedule them. The big boys won't play you unless it's a home game for them.
A 2-for-1.
That's why these MTEs are so important. And now even the MTEs are blowing up where with that NIL event, for instance, the Diamond Head Classic, BYU said, wait a minute, I want to be in that NIL event and make $1 million. And then they left. And then Boston College said, well, we're leaving too. The whole thing blows up. So I think, Claibs, you were right on it. This separation, it's getting closer and closer faster than any of us expected.
One other thing with regard to the teams that are on the outside looking in, they come up a win short somewhere and everybody said, well, play better or beat somebody. I think what they've got to come up with to create a legitimate reason. When you look at the schedule, and it's all about what you do non-conference too. You can't play who knows State and East Bumfuck Wesleyan or anybody like that. You have to play teams that are recognizable. So follow me here. I think that you have to do a couple of things. You have to play a regional opponent like Missouri would play Iowa. St. Louis, you would play somebody that's comparable. And then you find a conference that's comparable to yours. And so if you finish in fourth place in your conference, you're going to play a fourth place team in somebody else's conference. And then also what you're going to do is find a way to put a team that was in the tournament the previous year on your schedule. Because if nothing else, you can market your program. We played a team that was in the tournament. Now, that team probably doesn't exist because of the portal, because most of those guys take that team photo and that's the last time you see them. But I think if you create more of an objective schedule with regard to not having to explain why you're playing some of these blood donors, and then when you don't get in the tournament with 20 plus wins, and they say, well, you didn't schedule anybody. This makes you play better. And Missouri Valley Conference was one of the first schools about, 10, 15 years ago?
Maybe longer. Doug Elgin. Doug Elgin
was there. They insisted that their members go out and schedule up better. So if you're fledgling and you have to take a 2-for-1, so be it. You now are in the system. And I think that's what those mid-major teams are going to have to do in order, when this thing blows up, that's the only way they're going to be able to have a chair when the music stops, where maybe they're absorbed by the Big East or some other conference that's a basketball-only conference. That's the only way. If not, they're going to be in another relegated conference. The money won't be as good, and all of a sudden they'll become a farm system for the rest of college basketball, because anytime you have a good player, they will go get that player because they're going to have more money. They're going to have an opportunity for him to grow, and the rest is history.
A great note from our producers here as we get back to the bracket. 111 out of 111 bracketologists on Bracket Project picked WVU to make the tournament. I think it's safe to say they were pretty surprised that they were left out of the field. Chris, I want to get your thoughts, though. As we talk about a lot of these mid-majors, that's truly the best part of this current iteration of March Madness. Lord hopes they never change it, as we're kind of fearing they could, because those 12 seeds or 13 seeds that come from the mid-majors, I think, are my favorite part, and a lot of people's, seeing what those teams are able to do if they could pull off the upset. Chris, do you have any double-digit seeds that you like that you think might be able to surprise people from that mid-major class?
Oh, boy. You know what? I mean, the funny thing is you can talk about this all day long. Oh, well, I don't like this one. Blah, blah, blah. There's always going to be some that get through. It's a guarantee. There's no two ways about it. I mean, you look at the 10 seeds and a team like Utah State, who Missouri saw a couple years ago in the first round. Their pace is fun, right? They push. They've got a UCLA team that was very inconsistent this year, and so like that's a team that we certainly would like. We mentioned Texas before as an 11 seed. So inconsistent, but when you have that talent, and then you sort of got the galvanizing effect of what's happening right now with their coach, and a coach who has dealt with them in tough times before. I mean, I hate to say it, but I think Texas is the kind of program that I think you should look out for, pushing a little bit farther down the line a little bit as well. And then the one that's getting super popular, and every year you hear it, there's always an Ivy League school that gets people excited. But Yale is a team. Yale is a team that's fun, and they push it and they score. And they're playing a Texas A&M team that was not playing their best basketball down the stretch. And so I feel like I'll go ahead and do the standard Seth Davis if I have to pick an Ivy League team to make it to the Sweet 16. Yale is one that I think really is going to be somebody for Texas A&M they better not be looking forward to that round of 32 matchup, because I think Yale will go out there and they will score. So those are kind of the ones that jumped out to me early on when we were talking about some of those double-digit seeds.
I'll give you two: Colorado State and McNeese State. Even
no
though
way.
Will Wade's already trying to take another job before the tournament even begins, which is really a Will Wade thing to do. Yeah, I mean, that's him. But those are two teams, I think, and maybe in particular Colorado State, but I think those two teams could be a double-digit seed that could win a couple.
Kareem, we know 12s can beat 5s. I mean, we know better than anybody, right? Any 12 seeds you like from this bracket, Kareem?
I mean, I haven't really took a deep dive into all the seeding, but again, these the tournament is for those Cinderella stories, those mid-majors, or those teams that you don't get a chance to watch throughout the course of the year to make those amazing runs, and all of a sudden America gets behind these teams and find out who these players are. So as a homer, I want Missouri to continue to advance, make to the Final Four. But as a fan of basketball, as a player, you just want to see people go out there and compete and play well and chase dreams. So I'm looking forward to kind of watching a lot of teams I don't get a chance to watch throughout the course of the year, and just kind of seeing how it all plays out.
Earl, did you have any double-digit seeds, long shots that you think could have a Cinderella run?
It's weird because I'm a nerd for watching that championship week, all those one-bid leagues.
Oh, yeah.
I do. Even though UC San Diego was really good. Out of the
Yes.
Oh, they're so good.
They're really good. Lipscomb is good.
Ooh.
They got this 6A kid, Horovich, whatever. They play a banged-up Iowa State team. Who's still trying to get healthy. High Point is really good.
Yep.
They go 9-10 deep, get up and down the court, and they can really score. Grand Canyon from last year, they're pretty good. They got I forgot who they match. I'm just like Kareem. I'm just getting through that.
We just saw the bracket. It's tough.
Yeah, they're good. High Point plays Purdue. So
yes.
Interesting thing. Purdue's lost a few of those early round type of games. And Grand Canyon plays Maryland, who's a good team, but they match up pretty well with them. We played them. They got size, athletes, good guard play, and everything. So they're just a few. People kind of look for the trendy picks. They look Drake or whoever, 5-12. But it's harder to pick that who's that Oakland, Kentucky type thing. That's what usually happens when everybody's looking this way. That's when you see a St. Peter's knock off Purdue or Fairleigh Dickinson or Purdue at 1-6. Those are the toughest ones to predict, and those are the ones that jump out while everybody's kind of looking at the trendy ones. So those are some of the deeper, lower seed had a chance to maybe pull some. Akron is also really, really talented. Mid-American has done well in past years, getting playing that tough game.
Akron's got that matchup against Arizona. That's kind of an up and down team. You just never do know. I want to ask you guys about the matchup for VCU out of the A-10. BYU was a red hot team, maybe one of the hottest teams in the country prior to the loss they took in the Big 12 tournament against Houston. They like to run up and down. They like to score. I wonder, though, Rammer, that VCU team could maybe kind of take BYU out of its element a little bit, kind of like Houston did, I wonder.
Well, and a lot of this is probably from getting smacked in the face a couple of times every year against VCU. And even though the Pelikan split with them, they're so tough and physical. I think they can be in a game with anybody. And when I fill out my bracket, I think I'll take VCU in that game. They are tough and nasty, and they've got guys that can create shots and make shots, like Philip Russell. And I think VCU is going to surprise some folks.
It's going to be interesting because BYU is one of the most entertaining teams to watch.
Yeah.
They can score 90, and they got that Igor Demman. He's 6'9" point guard.
Mm-hmm.
He'll be in the NBA maybe next year, and they shoot it from anywhere. So that's probably one of the biggest contrasting styles. But like you say, we see VCU, they got athletes, they're physical, and they're going to have to be to kind of slow this BYU team because they can really shoot it. They move without the basketball well, and they really put up the points. They're a team you thought that could make a run 2-3 rounds in if they were to get by VCU.
Yeah. And, Earl, I think what I've been observing as we watched the Atlantic 10 tournament this past weekend, Max Shulga is really a dynamic player, but he can be compromised. He can be slowed down. And if the length and athleticism of BYU does that, then VCU will be in trouble, I think.
Yeah, he didn't play his best in the tournament. You're still able to win this tournament. Bama kind of got them through. If he's not playing well,
they have trouble.
They're in trouble. Him and Bamisile have to, because those are guys. Bamisile's the one guy that can create shots, and Phillips got to knock shots down too.
Yeah,
Deb Jackson has done a pretty good job, but yeah, it's a scary matchup. I think it's a scary matchup for both of them.
Both, yeah.
But I was impressed with BYU the way they can. I watched a couple of their games. They really went to Iowa State, put it on the Cyclones, and went to Arizona and scored 95, 94. So you're not only going to have to guard, but you're going to have to score. I don't think you can hold them to 65, 70. You're going to have to score some points you're on your own.
Yeah.
That's what sort of frustrated me, seeing the bracket come out with BYU against VCU, because I was watching those tournaments going, I want to take BYU in my bracket with the way they can score. And then we see, that matchup with VCU going to be interesting. We'll bring Chris, Kareem, and Claibs back in. We've gotten some questions from our viewers, and want to remind the viewers, if you're watching over on Twitter/X, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Go over to YouTube, search Sports Hub STL, and hit that subscribe button. This is the kind of content we'll be bringing y'all across all sports all year long on Sports Hub STL. But I wanted to get back to a little bit of a Mizzou thought here, because we did get some questions. How far can the Tigers actually go in this tournament? We don't want to count our chickens before they hatch, but I'll start with you, Chris. What are your thoughts on potentially the question coming in from G. Kasich? How far could Mizzou go with the draw that they ended up with? We'll go around the horn.
Yeah, I mean, I love the first round matchup. Like I said, this is as good as it could have been. The second round matchup's about as bad as it could have been. And so Texas Tech is a good team. And Kareem and I talk about the switching all the time, and I just am having nightmares of JT Toppin putting in 30 because, they switch to where Tony Perkins is on him, or, somebody else, Caleb Grill, and he's just, so that's a scary matchup. But again, at the end of the day, Kareem and I have talked about this for the entire season. When Missouri is right and they're firing on all cylinders, defensively, offensively, with the shooting, there's not a team in the country that they cannot play with. So, unfortunately, for the last give or take 3 weeks, we have not seen the best version of this team. Things can change. So I'm going to be positive and say that they will. And if that's the case, this team can make a run, and they can be their second weekend. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Having said that, if we see defensive lapses like we've seen over the course of the last 3 weeks, if we see inconsistent shooting, those sort of things, then all bets are out the window, and maybe Drake does get them in the first round. So I think this isn't as much about who they play as who they are in these games. If we see what we saw against Alabama, this team is a Final Four caliber team. I don't think there's any doubt about that. They have the talent. They've got the drive. They can play in a lot of different ways. So it's there. The question is, are they going to be that team that played Alabama, or are they going to be the one that didn't show up to play Texas and then lost basically 4 of their last 5 games?
And in fairness, Kareem, when you look at the way they finished the regular season, didn't love it, right? But when you get into that SEC tournament, they played well to beat Mississippi State without Mark Mitchell. And then you look at what Florida was doing to some teams in the SEC tournament. That performance Mizzou put on maybe doesn't look quite as rugged as the score maybe ended up being. That's a really good Florida team that ended up with a 1 seed for a reason. Do you think some of those lapses that Mizzou had, they found a little bit of equilibrium there in the SEC tournament to where maybe that would allow our predictions to be a little rosier?
I mean, Florida's my favorite going into the tournament. I think they're a great team, really well balanced, and playing great all year long. But for us, looking at those 4 out of the last 5 we lost, we wasn't playing horribly bad. We were still scoring. just small minor things from a defensive standpoint that we needed to address that led to those losses. So like I said, in the tournament time, all it takes is us finding the right group. We beat 3, top 5 teams this year. So we've shown at our best we can compete with anybody. So I anticipate, and I'm praying, I'm gonna be a homer and say that we sneak by Drake in the first round. It's gonna be a hard battle because I think they're gonna slow it down, so it's gonna be a slower, paced game. But I think, against if Texas advances, I see a 7-3 point game for Pelikan, really kind of snatching out.
There it
really
is.
Making a move and really kind of put it, because if he's hitting 7 threes, we got a great chance of winning. So that's my prediction with Sweet 16. And Sweet 16, anything after that is a bonus. So I'm anticipating the second weekend for sure.
And after that, by the way, I mean, there is a world in which Mizzou could face any of Kansas, Arkansas, and St. John's if they should get to that level. Claibs, I know you're kind of intrigued by any of those matchups. I bet.
I was kind of licking my chops on that, because once they get through the first weekend, then everybody's going to have to pay attention to them.
Yeah,
and because they'll have to beat some teams with everybody, and I know that we talked about Toppin, who has a potential to bust loose. You know what? This is a kind of tournament now where, hey, Toppin's going to get his, but we can make sure nobody else scores today.
Yeah.
And I think that's the mentality you have to have because of the fact Missouri has the ability to score with anyone. Somebody on their team is going to have to guard somebody too. Yeah. But I think that next weekend where you have a chance to face, as you mentioned, Brenden, Bill Self, Rick Pitino, and or John Calipari, all guys who have unique teams in their own right. So now this really becomes a coaching chess match that may come down to 6 to 8 minutes of a game. Mm-hmm. So I think Missouri really has a really plus opportunity to not only get through the first weekend, but make it very interesting for somebody in the second weekend.
That's a great point. Let's bring everybody in and get some final thoughts too. I'm curious if there's a favorite out there. We've talked about Florida, and I think Kareem is spot on with what we've seen that team do. Is there anything else that we haven't been able to touch yet, fellas, that stands out to you in particular? I'll start with Earl for your final thoughts on our Selection Sunday show.
I'll say 40 years ago in 1985, the Big East was the most dominant conference in the country, and they showed it by putting St. John's, Georgetown, and Villanova in the Final Four, 3 of the 4. 40 years later, the SEC has shown that kind of dominance. I mean, 14 teams, trading the number 1 spots. I mean, just incredible basketball. So I could see definitely at least 3 SEC teams in the Final Four. I mean, they're positioned for 4, actually. That Duke, Alabama, that Duke in that region is kind of dicey to me. But I see 40 years after that, I could see 3. I could see Florida, Auburn, and Tennessee all making it to the Final Four, with a Duke with a healthy Cooper Flag being that 4th team. But I see the SEC needs to, with the dominance they show, they need to complete the mission, so to speak, kind of like what the Big East did 40 years ago in 1985, because it was incredible basketball to watch all year long.
We really do need that from the SEC, or it turns into a football situation where everybody's going to have some thoughts to say about, SEC wasn't actually that great. I suppose we'll see. Claibs, you got some thoughts here? What haven't you told us yet that we're missing about this bracket?
I'm kind of on the same page with Earl. I think the Duke, if Flag is healthy, they're kind of like the gold standard of what college basketball has been for the last 40 years for so many different reasons. Somebody's going to slip up and make it interesting, and they'll be playing to get to the Final Four. But I think good talent and good coaching is going to win out this year. I don't see anybody. I don't see a Cinderella after the first weekend. I just think these teams are too good. And I know some people could say, well, the SEC's got 14 teams in. And my response is, okay, we'll take the 14 team. Who you want to play that's not in the tournament? What team in the tournament that's not in the tournament you want to play the 14th best team in the SEC? There isn't one.
No.
I mean, what this conference has done is remarkable, considering all the things that are going on with the portal and the NIL money, and we used to think this was a football conference. What they're doing is just fascinating. And I'm gonna give the NCAA credit for something. I know this may shock some people. I'm not sure if there's an entity that protects its brand better than the NCAA. And my point being, and you guys have all been to games at NCAA venues, you wouldn't know whether you were playing in Madison Square Garden or playing out in Cotton Plant, Arkansas, as far as the facility is concerned. They make sure their sponsors are the only names you see when it's on TV. They've also been smart enough to know that on those early pod games where they try and do it regionally, they don't sell a lot of those games out. You never see what the upper deck looks like. And they have done such a masterful job of showing how good their product is and how they are loyal to their sponsors and vice versa, where they even have all their broadcasters involved in doing TV commercials. There's no one who's not part of the NCAA that the NCAA doesn't want part of it. And I tip my cap to them. And I think the other sports franchises should take a long, hard look. Now, it's hard, but it's fair. And those sponsors and the networks get their money's worth and then some.
Yeah.
Kareem, what are your thoughts right now as we kind of wrap things up here on the Sports Hub STL Selection Show?
Yeah, just to touch on what Clay was saying. I mean, I think March Madness is my favorite time of basketball, regardless of NBA, all of it. It's one of my favorite sporting, weekends. So, as a former player who's experienced it, I feel great for these players to get a chance to kind of live this dream, get a chance to chase a championship, get to compete against the best, teams in the country. And like I said, I'm just looking forward to kind of seeing the stories. Like I said, my favorite is Florida from what I've seen so far this year. I'm looking forward to kind of seeing those, Cinderella teams that kind of come up and have those runs that we all remember 20 years, later. And just kind of seeing the fun and atmosphere that, March Madness brings. So I'm just looking forward to being a fan and enjoying how, Mizzou does.
Hey, are we going to drink some of that good liquor you have too?
And that sponsored by Educated Spirits.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you very much.
You were sipping during the show, and I was a little bit jealous.
There you go.
Nice.
Hey, we like the NCAA, man. We whore ourselves out too.
No
We got
question.
to. Yeah, all
Hey,
day.
we're all whores. Might as well be the best.
Yeah, right.
Pour our own stuff out too, not
There
somebody
you
else.
go.
I like it.
On that note, Rammer, I want to get your thoughts. I know this is one of your favorite times of the year as well.
Without question. One thing we haven't talked about is what it takes to win games, and night after night after night, with exceptions, but not many, free throw shooting, not only percentage, but volume. And you'll see night after night, the team that gets to the line the most wins. And so that goes to officiating. What a shock that I would bring that up. But it's funny. I was doing the Missouri Valley tournament. It's amazing how good officiating gets when you don't care who wins. It's really shocking. But I'll tell you. But what will be interesting, see the way games are called, how much they so-called let them play, see who the aggressors are, getting to the rim and then getting to the free throw line. The teams that can do that game after game are going to have the best shot to win.
Hey, Rammer,
star players too. This is time for star players.
They're going to take care of good players.
Yeah.
Rammer, I'll ask you and Earl this question, and Kareem, you were part of this. I've always found the early part of the tournament was so disjointed because A, you don't have enough good officials. B, a lot of these guys are worn down because they work too much. And C, you're putting individuals together instead of teams or groups that never worked with each other before. They're judged on their merit and what they've done during the course of the season. But as the games go down in numbers, the officiating, in my opinion, gets better because the better officials survive that first round.
Yeah, the cream rises.
Yeah.
Chris Pelikan, I know you've got a Final Four for me. I know you're a bracket fiend. It's been out for just a little over 2 hours, but you already have that thing filled out, don't you?
Well, I don't have it filled out mentally. It's filled out for sure. But
okay.
I love that, we did basically an hour here, and Earl just mentioned Auburn, the number one overall seed for the first time. I mean, I think Auburn wins this thing. I think Auburn is the most complete team. I truthfully think that if we look at history, the teams that roll through conference tournaments, a lot of times playing 4 games or 3 games in 3 days, that's tough on a team. So Auburn got their couple in, and they're but in terms of what they are, so I definitely think Auburn's there. I think Duke makes it as well. Cooper Flagg going down is a huge thing, but even more huge, the fact that Duke still kind of ran roughshod through the rest of that tournament without him. I mean, that's got to be a confidence boost of an epic proportion. So I will definitely say that I like Auburn and Duke. And then if we start talking about in the West region, the one team that that hasn't been thrown out there, I mean, the two-time defending champion UConn Huskies, no one's talking about. Now, granted, they have had a crazy bad year. Really probably needs a straitjacket at some point in time. But I mean, the guy knows how to coach at this point in time of the year. So I wouldn't sleep on them. I'm going to call them for Final Four. I think I'll give St. John's the nod out of that side of the bracket just because of the way they play, and I think Pitino's a different coach at this point in time. And then if we talk about the Midwest, tough one. I think you have to go with Tennessee. I hate going 1-1, 2-2, but I don't know that I think that bracket. If we're picking which regions that strongest to weakest, my thought is the Midwest is the weakest of them. I think Houston's a very good team, but I feel like Tennessee is a better team based on what they had to go through this year. And then if you just look sort of down bracket, I'm not crazy about Kentucky as a 3, so I think I'll stick with that Final Four of Auburn, Duke. We'll go with St. John's and Tennessee. That's my Final Four.
I kind of agree with what you said there about that Midwest. And even when you talk about UConn as an 8 and you've got Gonzaga over in the Midwest as an 8, that could be that Midwest region could be where you get a little bit of craziness just because it doesn't seem like there's that team that stands out as the obvious one. Well, boys, this has been a lot of fun. We did go a little bit more than an hour. Once again, if you've been watching on Twitter or X, make sure you head on over to YouTube, Sports Hub STL. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. We've got lots of college basketball coverage for the local teams. We've got baseball coverage with the Cardinals coming. Blues is in full swing. City soccer. We got a little bit of everything over at Sports Hub STL. So thank you guys for being with me today. Thank you out there in listener land for watching. To Chris, to Earl, Claibs, Bob Ramsey, and Kareem Rush, thank you guys so much. This has been Sports Hub STL's presentation of Selection Sunday. Enjoy the games and stay tuned for more content to come.